Um, let's just move on then, because I'm sure our friends in Minnesota will tell us how correct we are and how we didn't get anything wrong or miss anything, and did,
as they always do.
as I always do. But our friends at Portland might have different feelings. So for the second year in a row after making MLS Cup final in 21, Portland Timbers missed the playoffs again. 43 points found them in 10th in the West, a single point outside of the playoffs, which was enough to send Gio Savarese packing. While Phil Neville and his group look to rebuild a team back to the greatness of what it once was, we are going to look back at 2023 to figure out what went wrong. And I'll send it to you first because I've been talking.
All right, well, I'm gonna hit the obvious one here. What is that defense? And this is me just trying to change up the name for each of my segments so that it doesn't sound like I'm talking about the same thing over and over again. But um, yeah, I want to talk about the Portland defense. For the most part, the team was lining up in what looked to be a 4-3-3 this season, with Paredes and or Diego Chara being the deeper midfielders, and then the back line, for the most part, consisted of, from left to right, Bravo, McGraw, Zuparic, and Mosquera. If you look at the defensive statistics at each player at their positions, and I went based off of the great tool on FBref that does the comparison to other players in the same position. Claudio Bravo was solid. Zach McGraw was phenomenal. Zuparic was bad. Mosquera basically played no defense. Diego Chara was okay, and Paredes was pretty good. The problem was that Paredes, a number of times, would be playing a bit more forward. So sometimes they'd be playing a 4-3-3 that's a bit more attacking. And in that case, Paredes would be a bit further up the field as opposed to deeper to where Diego Chara usually plays. And that meant that if teams could beat a 37-year-old Diego Chara, they basically only had two defenders to beat, that being Bravo and Zach McGraw. And all of this really resulted in them conceding 58 goals this season and having one of the worst defensive records in the league. And the solution's a little tough because I know there's a lot of factors at play here. I know one of them is that they had two important midfielders out with injuries, that being Eric Williamson and David Ayala. Getting those guys back will be an automatic boost to the midfield defense. There's also a factor of, playing a tactic that helps areas with defensive holes, such as that right side of the defense. That will now be the job of Gary Neville next season. So it doesn't exactly fill me with super amounts of confidence, but I will reserve judgment. Finally, there's just getting better defensive players. A stronger center back pairing for Zach McGraw, I think, would help a ton. Or even adding a couple more center backs can help if they play with a three at the back. Can help to cover the defensive hole that is Mosquera, who likes to bomb forward and not play much defense. So it's there's a few factors here. Some of it's just a patience game, but I think some of it is, the obvious and just trying to find better players for the defense.
I don't know where I'm going to pick up there because I've got points kind of scattered throughout there. I'll just go in order. Screw it. We vibe over here.
Go
Um,
for it.
I'm going to talk about the underperformance of designated players. We talked about it a little bit before. We've talked about it in past iterations of this miniseries. In a system where your roster rules only allow you to get three big name players who are supposed to carry the load, you cannot swing and miss. You can kind of get away with having one, but you can't swing and miss on two of them. And that's what happened here. Whether it be injuries or lack of ability or whatever it may be, the Timbers swung and missed on two of their three. Blanco was one of the injured ones. He got hurt early on. He didn't get over 500 minutes this year, only started twice, really didn't contribute much at all. And that now handicaps you from having, even at 35 years old, being an impact off the bench. Now, there were a lot of things up in the air about whether he was or was not a designated player. This is being listed from Wikipedia, right? Because it was um, at one point it was Niazgoda, it was Blanco, it was Yemi Chara, and it was check really quick here. The fourth one was Evander, right? Of course, because he's still here. And it was told that Chara and Blanco, or Blanco and Niezgoda, or Chara and there was a lot of lists. So I'm just going off of what Wikipedia said because I'm still not quite sure who is who. Blanco, Niezgoda, Evander were listed as the 3 designated players. Blanco didn't get over 500 minutes. Niezgoda didn't get over 700 minutes. And he also got hurt towards the end of the year. However, it really didn't matter because he only broke 45 minutes in a game 3 times in the first 20 appearances he made. He couldn't break into the starting 11. He couldn't make an impact when he was on the field. He lost the faith of the coach. And when you're getting paid over $1 million to do that and not allow that to be tied up in other, resources, not a great. So having him gone and likely Blanco either gone or down on a DP, off a DP deal next year if he does come back, really opens up a lot of options for them, and hopefully they don't swing and miss. But you can't miss on 2 of your 3 in this setup right now, or 2 of your 4 maybe next year. Who knows? Ooh,
You took the words right out of my mouth. My
aw,
next point was getting more out of your designated players.
nice.
I'll just kind of go through my notes. I'm sure a lot of it steps right on what you were just talking about. But I think this is probably an obvious one for a lot of people's focus on what went wrong for Portland this season. And I think a lot of people's focus honestly was on Evander because he had a really slow start. He had a really big price tag. The expectations were super high. But to your point, I don't think he was really the problem for the designated player spot. I went off the same thing. I checked Wikipedia. It had Evander, Niezgoda, and Blanco as the DPs. So that's what I went along with as well. And starting with Evander, the question is, was his season below expectations? In my opinion, I would say yes. Was this a bad season? Not at all. He finishes the team's leading scorer with 9 goals and chipped in another 5 assists. That is solid. That is very solid. Honestly, I'll take any chance to bring him up, but it reminds me of South American Player of the Year, Pity Martinez. Huge price tag that came in, high expectations, still put in like good numbers and still was a good player in the league, just never really hit the superstar MVP level that people were expecting of them. And Evander's got more time. He's, I'm not trying to label him as the next Pity Martinez already, but definitely don't think he had a bad season at all. The other 2 DPs, as you were talking about before, that's a whole nother story. And I know that they were battling injuries like you were talking about, but the biggest thing for me was that they still combined between the 2 of them made 37 appearances this season, but only 7 of those were starts. They just couldn't either consistently stay healthy to be on the field, or they just couldn't get the trust of the coach to be a starter in this team. And I mean, that's 2 designated player spots. That's just, you can't do that in this era of MLS.
Correct.
They combined for 2 goals and 1 assist in the season from 2 designated players. That's not good enough.
Sorry, I did want to go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
No,
I'll jump in at
that's
the
okay. You can jump in.
The Portland Timbers official roster on Timbers.com lists Yimmy Chara as the 3rd one, not Blanco. But even then, Yimmy Chara didn't break 750 minutes. He only had a goal and 3 assists. So it's the same deal. He also had injuries with muscles and hamstrings and stuff, and which sucks. But yeah, you still can't get away with stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not here.
Yeah.
It's probably a nod to saying maybe don't sign 3 designated players or close designated players, all of which are 29, 34, and 32.
Yeah.
And then you had Evander, who's the young guy, but still.
It's probably a good idea. Solution, with a rumored potential 4th designated player spot coming next year, if we can get the Colorado owner types to buckle, it's going to be more important than ever to get your DPs right, because teams who can get it right with 4 designated player spots are going to be at a different level. And teams that swing and miss or don't try at all are going to be left in the dust. It's not going to be MLS 2.0 anymore, where you can sign a couple of aging designated players, and because there's only a couple of them, like you can get away with them not being good or not playing. It's just not going to work anymore. So they need to get whatever combination of Blanco, Niezgoda, and or Chara off designated player contracts like yesterday. Let Gary Neville bring in the designated players that he wants for his system to pair with Evander, and then give them the game time next season. I know some of it is out of their control with injuries and stuff, but get them to play consistently and get some decent minutes this year. They got to at least be above 1,000 minutes.
Yeah,
It's a
right.
low bar, but you know,
Right now they haven't hit it. So yeah, it's a good point. Um, I still can't believe we're begging owners to add one more DP slot. Like we're not even saying you have to use it, but just add it.
I can't believe there's. I mean, I can believe that there's owners fighting against it, but it's just so awful that they're fighting against that. I wish nothing more than those owners to sell their teams and get out of the league.
Bro, I'm telling you, like anti MLS Twitter and like anti MLS crew, they don't always have legs to stand on. Most of the time they don't. But when they talk about stuff like that, it's like, okay, now you're giving them the fuel to just spew more stupid, right?
We should just all team up and we can maybe get them out of the league. That would
I,
be
I'd
the goal.
I'd really be interested to see what it would look like to have like a fan-owned MLS side. I doubt it would happen, but I think it'd be pretty cool. Like I see like Orange County and USL is doing like a fan-owned type of thing, or like at least a fan-owned portion. I think that's pretty cool, but I can't imagine
Nah, there's
it
too much
happening
money
here.
being thrown around in the US. It would get bought up really quick.
Yeah. Um, my second point, I love me some off-field drama. So I'm going to our friend Aljaz Ivacic and talking a little bit about his antics. We mentioned it with DC, we mentioned it with TFC. Off the field issues distract you from the game in front of you. Portland were affected by this as well when Aljaz Ivacic brought his grievances to the media about Timbers coaching decisions. So on the third game of the season, he was benched 3 times in a row, and people thought that he was just injured, right? Oh, he's not playing because he played a whole bunch last year. You picked him in your top 5 goalkeeper draft, I'm pretty sure. We all thought he was going to be the guy, and he was bench. And we all thought he was injured, and he comes to a reporter and says that he was fit to play and everything else was a lie, end quote. Gio Savarese then had to face the media, explain why he lost the starting spot to David Bingham. He didn't do enough stuff in training. He wasn't working hard enough, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward 6 months to September, where he files a complaint against with the MLSPA for, quote, abusive conduct and tampering, claiming that he wanted to leave Portland Timbers and was denied multiple times. 2 weeks later, this ends with MLS suspending Ivacic for 3 games and fining him an undisclosed amount for using threatening language towards officials of the Portland Timbers. He ended up not play. He ended up playing like 15 of 17 games, or 15 or 17 games, and Portland obviously didn't finish. But when all that stuff is going on in the locker room, and a guy who's going out saying that the coach doesn't know anything and that people aren't as good as you, and blah 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 blah, that dude walked to the locker room on the morning of a training session. The energy in the room goes, right? Everybody's having a good time, laughing. That dude walks in, it's like, oh, here's Mr. All About Me, who doesn't want to be here and we can't talk about anything anymore. He's going to, spew it out to the media. It kills anything you're doing. And then you try and take that out to the field. That's a night. So all of that had to have taken a toll on the locker room. And then inevitably it would lead to some on the pitch issues as well. I'm a big fan of winning in the locker room first. And obviously Portland was not successful in that endeavor.
Yeah, not to mention that he plays in a very vocal leadership-esque position and goalkeeper.
Oh yeah.
It's a great point. Mine is unrelated, but my last point here for them is a lack of consistency. This team was massively inconsistent all year. And I'm sure there were many factors that play in that, some of which I'm sure we already talked about. But to begin the season, the team only won 1 of their first 7 games. On the flip side, towards the end of the season, right when we were doing our predictions, of course, this team put themselves in a prime position to make the playoffs. Uh, going on a 7-game unbeaten streak where they won 5 of those 7 games. And it put them in prime position to make the playoffs, but again, the inconsistency hit. And in the last 3 games of the season, where they were in a really good spot to make it, they got 1 point and managed to miss the playoffs. So, really, honestly, this last part was the biggest thing for me. But outside of that late win streak that they had in the season, this team did not win back-to-back games the entire year.
Wow.
They were just incapable of getting any sort of consistency going. And I'm sure a huge part of that is the injuries. I feel like every guy we've talked about so far had some kind of injury for them this season. That's definitely not going to help. But solution wise, I mean, inevitably it will get better as these guys get healthier again. But I think it's kind of obvious, but having consistent lineups and tactics will, I think, help the team play more consistently. It'll help them build chemistry together. It'll help them play more consistently. And whether the results and the healthiness of the squad allow for this next season, that's another story. But I think getting healthy, maybe it is to your point before. Maybe you gotta choose your designated players more carefully. Pick guys with less of an injury history. Pick guys that are a bit younger. Maybe that helps to keep them more consistent and on the field.
Yeah, and that actually rolls right into my third point pretty well. It is the injury train. David Ayala, Eric Williamson, both of them going down with knee injuries early on. You are likely seeing them as 2 of your guys that you're going to rotate your midfield around. And that's a lot of your game plan gone when both of them are done. You add in Blanco, Niazgoda, Yimi Chara, a bunch of players in that kind of category that we were just talking about. You're missing, like you come into a season with a game plan, right? This is how I expect my players to play. And you have your I'll use the term surprises. The guys who you come in, you're like, oh, he's probably not going to do too much. Oh, wow, he's done well in training. Let's try him out. Let's try him out. He does well in a game or two. It gives you some difficult things to deal with. But what you're not ready for is losing 2 or 3 of your big players so early on in the season and then having to try and work around that when you can't bring in replacements. So stuff like that is difficult. And then that's where you're like, okay, well, I hope my academy's up to snuff because they're the next guys up. And when they're not, and they're not ready, well, that's where things start to go bad. So Portland couldn't play through their injuries this year, which again is tough in a league like MLS, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. But that's also the reason why we can't do too many big punishments for the league the way it's set up, right? How are you going to tell somebody, oh yeah, 2 of your 3 designated players are out for the year? You have to play academy kids, and if you don't, we're cutting your franchise value by 90%. Good luck. Just can't, right? So, yeah, hopefully they're all healthy. They come back next year a bit stronger and are ready to go again.